Very much, President Macron. I just want to make two brief comments. Last year, we were here for another financing conference, and a critical decision that we took last year referred to the expansion of the SDR allocations. And the idea was that the countries of Africa would get a greater share, a greater part of that allocation. That didn't happen. The traditional formula was applied, and I think that what that tells us is that whatever it is that we want to propose here, we need also to dial into the details of those proposals so that we have a realistic chance of having the proposals implemented. The second, finance is a major challenge for the nations of Africa to initiate the adaptation and mitigation measures that are needed to confront the climate crisis. We have large sums of money that are readily available on the continent, which can be brought into play. And I refer to the huge sums of money that are taken out of the continent illicitly. We've been told, ever since Thabo Mbeki's committee, that we're dealing in the order of $100 billion a year annually of monies that are taken out of the continent illegally, illicitly. One can imagine the significance of bringing this money into play. Were we able to plug the loopholes that permit these outflows to take place? What I would suggest is that we recommend that the African Union and the G7 OECD countries establish a working committee to deliberate on this matter and make recommendations for action by the two groups. We can talk about a 3 to 6 months period. A lot of work has already been done in this area, but we need to have a dual approach to how these matters can be resolved. And I believe that if we're able to do that, we would make a tremendous impact on the financial problems that bedevil the African continent. So I would suggest that if there is agreement around this idea, that we find a place in the summit declaration for the idea of this joint working committee. I'd like to end by saying that, like all my colleagues, we want to thank you, President Macron, for bringing us together. We also thank our sister, Mia Motley, for the important part she played in preparing the grounds for this summit. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Je voudrais commencer, pardon, je te coupe la parole. I just wanted to start by conveying a message of solidarity to Barbados and all the colleagues of the region, because as you are here, and I want to thank you here for your leadership and your inspiration. Your country was hurt by a big hurricane very early in the season, and please convey our regards, solidarity to your people, and we will be here for sure for whatever you need. But thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And thank you for recognizing that the Eastern Caribbean, as we speak, is facing Tropical Storm Brett and its continued effects, and we appreciate the solidarity expressed by you and others here. I think we can claim movement. The issue will always be now, are we moving fast enough and with enough scope? The ambition has certainly increased in the last 2 days. And I think we've heard from the statements this morning from Secretary Yellen, from the Prime Minister of China, from yourself, from the President of Ghana, from Kristalina, that there is the political consensus that this issue is bigger than each and every one of us, and that we have to be able to work together to be able to make a difference. The multilateral development banks will have to change how they do business, and I think that is accepted. The last statement by Secretary Yellen that recognizes the possibility of working with the private sector and philanthropy to boost Its capacity to meet the challenges of global public goods is really the issue. We've been talking about climate, but let us talk about the pandemic. The reality is that whether you take the numbers given by the pharmaceutical companies of at least 1 billion, there are 10 pathogens that we need to scale up work on to be ready for phase 2A in the event of a challenge so that we can move with speed. There are 5 pathogens that we need to deal with antimicrobial resistance. That is going to be the biggest problem that the world will face by 2050 in terms of killing people, and that will reverse a century of medical progress. What is needed is somewhere between 1 billion, if you listen to the pharmaceutical companies, and Ngozi, your commission, 10 billion. That is, if we take the higher number, the cost of 30 F-22s. That's what it is. And therefore the choice for us to put that money aside is too simple for us not to do it. We all went through COVID, and we all saw how COVID decimated each and every one of us, carrying some countries back 2 to 3 decades. So I ask us to recognize that the moment has come for this to be the new decision point for what an international bank for reconstruction and development looks like in the 3rd decade of the 21st century. It is not the 5th or 6th decade of the 20th century. Secondly, I want to thank us for being able to realize the promises that were made. And that's important in keeping trust. But I fear that if we don't go to Dubai with a record, we will lose the trust of the global population. Dr. Sultan spoke this morning. I think the time has come for us not to speak in silos anymore. And it therefore means bringing together, just as we've come together in Paris as global leaders with the international organizations, that we need now to sit down with the private sector leaders across oil and gas, across renewable energy, across finance, insurance, transport, if we are going to find a common problem, a common solution to our problem, unless there is a plan to go and live on Mars, we do not have a choice. And I hope that this convocation and conversation can take place within the next 4 to 8 weeks. We cannot go to the world's population again making promises and yet saying that this is the most urgent problem facing mankind. We have the capacity to act urgently when we need to. Well, we need to now. Rules are made by us. They're not made to break us. We are made to shape them. And if we can't shape the rules in this time as others shaped them before, then we will be the ones accountable for what potentially can be the worst reality of mankind. To believe that human species will exist forever and to believe that failed societies don't happen is to assume an arrogance that is not reflected in our history. And I trust, therefore, Emmanuel, that we will leave here with a greater commitment to ensure that that urgency takes place. I believe also that geopolitics and national politics cannot be allowed to stand in the way of this great crisis. If you cut each of one of us, we bleed. We have the same needs. And we therefore, as the Prime Minister of China just said, recognize that we have to find the common bounds and bridges where we can work together. This matter of the climate crisis is the panacea to be able to allow us to fight off the global politics and the domestic national politics. And I fear that if we don't act with alacrity, then we will see too many people losing their lives and livelihoods. So we leave Paris not with speeches simply, but with a commitment, as the President of Ghana said, to get down into the granular detail to make sure that that which we agree here can be executed. I'm satisfied that the start is correct with respect to the mobilization of the 200 billion, but we know deep down that's not going to be enough. And hence, the parallel discussions for the reform of governance must take place. The last point that I want to make is this. Difficult discussions require courage. And the most difficult discussion that we face is how do we shape a world in the image of the countries of today. Regrettably, it means that each of us must give up some space if we are to shape that new world. And because we don't want to give up space, we now are forced to because of the outside and existential challenges. That is actually the way of life. Life presents us with the things that we least want to do when we least have the capacity to do it. But if we don't summon the courage to rise to the occasion, then we will pay the ultimate price. We have never had the appropriate discussions for the dismantling of an imperial order. And whether it is in the United Nations system or whether it is in the multilateral development banks, regrettably, we continue to see first-class and second-class citizens. Bob Marley had a song called War. We would do well to go back and read the lyrics of it, and not just to read them, but to walk the walk and to talk the talk. I want to thank each and every one of us who has come here, because above all else, I sense a genuineness in the hearts of people here, because I think deep down we all realize this is our moment with destiny.